Buongiorno, benvenuti. I started learning Italian, but unfortunately my Italian is still so bad that it's impossible for me to deliver this talk in Italian to you. So you'll have to bear with me when I do this in English. So glad to see that so many of you are here, because the topic that I'm presenting to you today is really, at least for me, it's highly important already. And I hope that it will become even more important to all of you after this talk. My name is Christiane Goebels. I come from the SAP SE, so I'm based in Germany, right in the headquarters of what is, in the meantime, a company that has 100,000 employees. Most of them, or at least the majority, is really in development teams. And I myself used to be a software developer for close to 20 years now. So that means that I started my career, my IT career, early in 2000, and I started with SAP. I haven't spent all of my time with SAP, though. I left 3 times, and I came back for, well, basically it was always the same reasons that made me come back. At the same time, it was always the same reasons that made me leave. And when I started my career there, it took me quite a while to figure out that, so either something is wrong with this company or something is wrong with me. And you know, as a career starter, you're more likely to think, okay, something is probably wrong with me because I just don't seem to fit in. I couldn't really point my finger at what was wrong. I just always felt like, you know, this insecurity. I knew that I was well trained, and actually I had all the capabilities and skills to properly do my job. But I still had that feeling that nowadays you would probably call it imposter syndrome. I did not know that term by then. Not sure if everybody's familiar with that. So imposter syndrome is not being a true imposter. Well, a true imposter would be that you're really a fraud, so you claim to be able to do things that you actually can't. The imposter syndrome is this fear of failing despite knowing that you're actually capable of doing the job. I constantly felt like an imposter, despite all my knowledge. And that was kind of weird. So eventually, that made me leave for the first time, because I felt like there's so much pressure and there's so much stress, and I always feel like I have to deliver this perfect image. So every time I enter the office in the morning, it feels like I put on a mask. I have to put on this mask, and I have to appear as somebody who already knows it all, which is bad for multiple reasons. Like, for instance, it keeps you from asking the right questions if there's something that you really don't know. And given that computer science is such a wide field, how likely is it that you already know everything? It's impossible. But this kind of feeling, it stayed with me through the years, and that eventually made me leave, because I felt like, okay, maybe it's really about me, and I don't fit in, and I don't feel well, and I cannot also, you know, unfold my full potential because I just don't dare. I always have this fear of failing and being discovered as a fraud, as not knowing it all, and that's just so uncomfortable. And then I came back, and after a couple of years I realized it's still the same, so I left again, and you know, here we go. But I'm back, and actually I came back to SAP in 2012 already. Again, starting off as a developer, then as a development architect, and then I moved over into my new role being a dev culture advocate just this February. And this was kind of the alternative to leaving again. Because after I came back this time, it again took me quite a while to figure out that these things that were annoying me were still the same. But this time I started talking to other colleagues about this. And all of a sudden I realized, that's not just me. Actually, there's so many people there who have kind of the same problems, who feel similarly awkward when they enter the office, who always feel like they are wearing this mask, who are afraid of failing, who are afraid of being discovered as somebody who does not know it all. And bear with me for a couple of minutes. I'll explain how this goes together with diversity and inclusion. And so the alternative to leaving SAP again was just stop complaining about it and try to do something about it. And by coincidence, there was this job offering, because obviously the top management at SAP by that time had realized that there were a lot of people having the same issues, complaining about the same things. And they started creating this program where we should just turn around, have a look at how we are working internally, what our culture on the engineering level looks like, and how we can fix it. And diversity and inclusion is actually a very, very large topic in that. So this is actually corporate culture at SAP, the how we run principles that we have. And personally, I'm going to talk about the embrace differences piece, because that, if you have a look at the official SAP homepage, there's an explanation to it, and this embrace differences piece is actually all about having a diverse environment and also displaying inclusive behavior. Now, the thing is, a lot of companies that I've seen have values similar to those. How many of you work in companies where there are some kind of equal values in their corporate culture? Raise your hands, please. Yeah, okay. I would think so. And how many of you can feel that these values are really being, that they are tangible in your daily work? Yeah, that's also not a surprise. These were a lot less hands raised for those of you in the front. You don't see that. So that's actually also what happened to us. These principles are good. They're great. Everybody likes them. Everybody's behind them. Everyone in the company would sign these off. However, during the last year, when I moved over into my new role, I kept getting even more feedback from people in our company who were complaining about the fact that nobody really sticks to them. I mean, tell it like it is even harder, right? When you really want to tell the truth all the time and you really talk about failures and mistakes that you've made and, who is it that you're talking to? Maybe it's your manager or even one level above. It's not going to be easy. And it also depends on what leadership, if leadership acts like a role model in that case, in that respect, or if they really only want to hear about success. So that's the issue, right? So the issue is we have these values and we think these values are good, but for some reason, they're just not tangible in our daily lives. So basically diversity and inclusion, I mean, that's buzzwords that have been flying around for quite a while, right? And all technology companies who are successful nowadays know about these terms. Why? Because even top management has realized that when you have a more diverse team, you actually end up being more productive. Yes, sometimes it's a bit less comfortable for the people who are on the team because it's easier to bond with people who are kind of like you, right? But on the other hand, the issue is really like-minded people who are very much alike have a tendency to view things from the same perspective, and they also come up with with ideas that are very similar to each other. And so this is not going to boost your productivity, and it's not going to boost your innovation power if you really have a couple of people there. I just remember one team that I recently met at SAP. These were, I think, 10 people, and all of these 10 people were white men in their 30s, all having graduated at the same university, working in the same place, having been raised in that place. So that's, as little diverse as you can get, right? Of course they felt well. They kind of had their buddies with them. That's nice. But it doesn't make them more productive. And so what we know about diverse teams is there have been a lot of studies that give proof to the fact that these teams will be more productive. And that when you look for diversity and you look to hire the right people also for diversity, then you are also more likely to have higher financial returns than other competitors in your industry. So people are more innovative and people are more productive. But the fact that companies know about that lead to this issue. Has anybody ever heard of the Noah's Ark paradox? You have? Great. So actually, it's from a book. I'll show some book recommendations later on. The problem is that a lot of companies seem to think that you create a healthy, diverse environment in your teams by just selecting 2 of each kind and put them together in one team, so in one cramped situation, and let them sort it out themselves. But that's, of course, not how it works, right? It depends really very much on how you put these people together and how these people interact with each other and the way that you ask them or train them or reinforce an open mindset to make it possible for them to work together in a productive way. It's not just picking up as many different people as you can and putting them together in one room. That's not how it works. So what does diversity and inclusion actually mean? Generally speaking, when we think of diversity and inclusion, we think of, at first glance, we think of something like this, right? So if you have a look at these pictures, we have people with different ethnical backgrounds, we have people coming from different countries, we have people with different abilities or disabilities, and that's basically it. Most people will not go any further than that. And I'm saying that's not the truth, because diversity is not only what you can see from the outside. It's not just about the color of your skin. It's not just about whether you walk or whether you are in a wheelchair or whether you are visually impaired. That's just not the thing. Diversity is actually in every character, so every one of us is unique. So even if we have some similarities, it's not like you can tell right away just because I look like, similar to a lot of you, I guess. It doesn't mean that there cannot be substantial differences that are just not visible to the eye. For instance, think about how much recognition do you get in your company through marketing yourself. How many of you have to do self-marketing to become visible to management, to get your salary raises, and to get a promotion or a chance for promotion? Raise your hands, please. How many of you need to do this? Right. So what if I told you that like 50% of those people who just raised their hands are quite uncomfortable with this fact? It's really just about, are you raised in a way where accomplishments are something that you should be showing and that you can talk about, or maybe you aren't. And even if you are raised in the same country, you will end up with half of the people still feeling uncomfortable about it, because what we've been taught as children is, yeah, it's nice to have accomplishments, but don't go bragging about them. Now, when you have a manager who's responsible for 50 or 100 people, it's really hard to become visible if this manager is not exactly sensitive to the fact that also people who are less verbose are people who can be equally capable of doing a good job. The silent also have something to say. And actually, a lot of companies also promote people for the wrong reasons. So you should be promoting people for doing a good job and not doing good self-marketing. And it becomes even more complicated if you have a look at different cultural backgrounds, because there is the saying from the very same book that the Noah's Ark paradox comes from. And actually, the book even has that title, The Loudest Duck. Has anybody ever heard of this proverb? It's a Chinese proverb. And even before I stumbled across this book, one of my Chinese colleagues told me about this. when you are raised as a child in China, it appears that, at least in some areas, this is what Chinese parents teach their children. It's not like, for instance, in the US, where you are really encouraged to talk about your accomplishments. But it's rather the reverse. What you do get, usually, if you really go about, if you're loud talking about your accomplishments, there's this fear of getting too much attention, and then at some point it's going to turn on you. And now when you walk around with this blueprint of your cultural background in the back of your head, does this make you any less competent technically? Of course not. So what it does, though, is when you work for a multinational company, as I do, there are going to be a lot of people who don't have this imprint, who don't have this notion. And they're going to bypass you if management is not sensitive to these issues, if it's really just about making as much noise as you can about your accomplishments. And so it's not just an issue with the people who have this mindset. It is also an issue for the companies themselves, because they will be losing that potential. They will be losing the innovative power and the enthusiasm of people who simply don't want to do self-marketing. And how does this lead us back to inclusive behavior and diversity? That's what is behind a lot of those issues, right? So again, when you put a lot of people from different cultural backgrounds into one team, and then you think they're going to sort it out themselves, it's not going to work. There's things that you need to do about it. And we'll have a look what can be done about it a little later. So inclusive behavior is really more or less trying to be sensitive to all the needs and all the backgrounds and all the different mindsets that people in your team and in your company have. It's not only about physical abilities, it's about everything. So what can you do about it? So bad news is, when you start talking about these things, you will never, ever convince everybody in your company that this is important. I know that because I tried. I mean, of course, I haven't tried talking to each and every one of 100,000 employees, but I keep trying, and I talk to so many people about it, and a lot of times I get, a face like this. So people just start rolling their eyes. Oh, that diversity topic again. So don't start bugging me, And what I also often hear is things like, okay, so you are talking about diversity and inclusion issues. Who are you to talk about this? Yeah, you're female and it's a mostly male environment, but it's this gender topic again, and you're privileged, you've been raised in a country where you have everything, you had a good training, and what do you complain about? But that's kind of saying, just because I don't have the worst and the heaviest challenges that somebody could be facing in this issue, on these issues, I'm not supposed to talk about them? That's a bit odd, right? Do I have to then be a, black Chinese woman in a wheelchair with visual impairment and some Asperger syndrome to be able to talk about this? Yeah, exactly. It's exactly. What about? I mean, that would also be like telling to, I don't know, environmental activists, like people who protect animals. Okay, you're not one of those. I'm not a cow in some shed where I never see daylight. So who am I to complain about cows never seeing daylight? So no, that's not how it works. So don't let yourself be deterred. The good news is, when you start talking about diversity and inclusion as being important, you don't have to convince everybody in your company. Psychological science tells us that actually, if you really want to change something in a larger organization, it requires utmost 10%. You need like 10% of change agents who are behind the topic. and who are as interested into the topic as you are. And 10% is not that hard to make. I mean, yeah, okay, for SAP we're talking about at least 10,000 people, but you don't have to convert the complete company. You can start with your own team. And that's actually a lot easier. Second piece that you can actually do is yourself. Don't believe everything that you think. We all have our biases. We all have certain perspective on certain topics. And of course, if we try to empathize with others and try to put ourselves into their shoes, this only goes so far. But particularly when you talk about inclusive behavior, it's crucially important that you try this. You cannot look into their heads, but it really makes sense to try and put yourself into your team's shoes, each and every single one of them. Try to figure out what is their environment looking like to them, because it's going to be different from your perspective. And this is actually also a team exercise that you can have. You can really. We had this workshop where we were supposed to just randomly pick a partner and try to describe from their view what does their day look like, where are their challenges, and report that back to them and see whether we were right. Turns out it's quite a difficult task. It's quite a difficult exercise. So we tend to think that we see the world as it is. And it's just a good habit to keep questioning that. Sounds easy, but most of the time, the way that we evaluate what is happening around us happens on a more subconscious level. And so just make it a habit to question that. Every time that you think about it, what does it look to the others? How many of you have superstars in their teams? You have? You have? Okay. So also quite a couple of them. Why are superstars bad? Can you imagine? When you set up your team, and also companies who are trying to set up teams, successful teams, of course they will try to get the talented ones. Problem with this is that if you have a couple of superstars on your team, that this is actually more detrimental to the overall productivity and innovation power of the teams. Why is that? Because these superstars, not only are they probably very good at self-marketing, probably they are really technically very capable, but the issue is that they most likely will overrule and bypass people on the team who are more silent. And there are studies that have given proof to the fact that teams who have a couple of superstars among them actually are less productive and less innovative than teams that are really just made up of strong team players and who maybe also see themselves just a little more, near the ground. So don't fall for the old stars. That's a clear ask. If you're hiring people, or also yesterday we had this talk, how do you figure out what teams you want to work with? So also when you pick your next job, beware of those. No matter whether you are a manager trying to set up a team or trying to hire new talents, or if you are an employee looking for another job, it's not those superstar teams you want to be part of. There's a saying from Galinski and Schweitzer, and they actually had a study that they conducted on a sports team, but it does not only apply to sports, where they were finding that if you put too many old stars into one team, then actually play is going to get worse. Because they will be competing with each other. They all will believe that they can do the task best, and that prevents them from passing on the ball when it's required. So having a team of all-stars, they ended up having a less productive and less capable team than having a team where you have a lot of, medium to highly capable players. Because of rivalry. So hiring and promoting people right is really about creating a team that is built from team players and not superstars. And you need to look for people who have an open mindset and a growth mindset. Open-minded people will be more empathetic, will be able to really also create a more safe environment for everyone on the team, where it will be allowed to talk about mistakes that you make, where everybody will be able to speak up, because everybody dares. Because nobody is secretly rolling their eyes because, oh my God, what was that for a stupid idea? No, nothing of that kind. These are the people that you're looking for. These are also the people that you should be looking for on the teams that you want to work in. And a growth mindset is crucial because a growth mindset means people with a growth mindset don't have this fixed belief that you are born with certain traits and then that's it. And based on these traits, there's a couple of things that you can learn, and there's your boundaries. When you have a fixed mindset, that is A, bad for you, because you will also believe that there's things that you just cannot learn, no matter how hard you try. And B, you will also believe this about others. So if you encounter somebody who's obviously not there yet, so they don't know it all, and you have a fixed mindset, chances are high you also believe that they're never going to get there. Stupid in the beginning, always stupid. Something like this. This is bad. People with a growth mindset, however, they have this reverse perspective on the things where they say, no matter with what traits you're born, actually, by working hard enough, you can accomplish anything. It's not about having the IQ for it. It's just about, are you enthusiastic about something? Are you intrinsically motivated to learn something new? And do you get the material and the input to learn that? Then you can learn it. And then you can basically accomplish anything. And what also helps is looking for why-sayers. That's actually a quote from IKEA. They're looking for why-sayers when they recruit people. So the interesting question to ask is, when you have an interview, if you have people who question the status quo, these will always also, or usually also, be people with a growth mindset. And they will be more innovative. And definitely hire the learn-it-alls, not the know-it-alls. Nobody knows it all. People who think they need to appear as know-it-all will donate a lot of time and energy into putting up that image and into keeping it up. So this is definitely not what you want. Another study has shown that when you start implementing things around diversity and inclusion, there's a couple of things that you can do to get it started, and a couple of things that you really shouldn't. There are a lot of diversity and inclusion trainings everywhere. They're ubiquitous. Problem seems to be that the majority of them are of such bad quality, for multiple reasons, that studies have shown that when these trainings were implemented, that they basically made the companies turn away from a diverse and inclusive environment. So whenever they implemented these trainings, actually the diversity went down afterwards. Why is that? There's a couple of things that you can really do wrong with that. Apart from the nitty-gritty details of the content, the worst thing that you can obviously do is make them mandatory, because that's going to give you the eye rolling again, right? Second worst thing that you can do is make these trainings only available to a particular group of roles. So only train middle management, for instance, or only upper management. That would actually mean like, okay, managers need to know about this and what the teams do. Well, yeah, let's see. But it starts within the teams, as we've seen. And then there's also this concept of a unconscious bias that we all have. Maybe you've heard that term before. I think one of the first experiments that was done on unconscious bias is with people who were recruiting musicians in the US for a famous orchestra. And this orchestra, it turned out that for some reason, even if the people who were recruiting did not state that they'd only desire a particular kind of people on the orchestra, they had hired only white men. The complete orchestra, that's like a couple of decades back, was consisting of white men. Now we know that US population does not just consist of white men, and probably there's equally many women, black men, Chinese background, whatever you can think of, who could also play instruments very well. So how did that come? When talking to these people who were recruiting, they were all saying, no, that's not what we're looking for. We're really only looking for talent. So we're listening, and we're trying to find those people who are the best for the orchestra, so the ones with the best talent and the highest capabilities, and we're not looking for white men. Still, they were just hiring white men. And then they started this experiment where the audience, so the people who would be recruiting, were behind a curtain. So they kind of blocked out every side of the musician they were listening to. And they did not get any information about this musician. So they did not know whether this was a woman or a man, or what background they had, or what ethnicity they belonged to. And all of a sudden, the orchestra changed. And there were a lot of different people with different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and also in terms of gender, who were in this orchestra. And that not only made clear that even if you are trying to look for the best talent, then your unconscious bias against some people or other will kind of work itself through. It also means that these people were not even aware, that's why it's unconscious, they were not even aware of these issues, and they were actively trying to do something about it, but it didn't work out before they really pulled this curtain. So you need to tackle this unconscious bias. You need to tackle it in your teams and in your companies, and there is actually a test that you can start with, because basically, if I have a look at the audience here, it's like Ria O'Donnell said in her blog, nobody walks into their place of business deciding they're going to let their racist, sexist, homophobic flag fly all day, right? That's not what we're trying to do. But we still need to be aware of it doesn't matter how open you are, how open you try to be, we still have these prejudices that we carry around with us. That's just human nature. And it's not an issue by itself, it's just an issue if you never question that. So I don't want to go around walking like, this was me in my company previously, and I don't want this any longer. I don't want to appear happy, I don't want to have this imposter syndrome, I don't want to have to appear perfect, I don't want to have all these biases towards me. This is not what we want. This is not what we expect from our day. We spend too much time at work to really, run around like this all day. And one more important topic is actually also how you talk or how you go about responding to failures. This is also something that you can start in your team right away. So what we did in the meantime is we started implementing this into our Scrum meetings. We have a dedicated slot where we talk about failure in our retrospective and what we learn from it. So we try to come up with a blame-free failure culture where it's okay to fail. This is something that can easily be implemented. Find some like-minded people in your team who are also behind that and start with it. It doesn't hurt. Encourage your managers to do the same. They are role models in that way because they are the ones who evaluate your performance. So if you can convince them to also let you in on their failures, I mean, everybody makes mistakes, then this is really something where you can create a lot more of a safe environment in your own team. And the more teams that you get convinced, the better it's going to get within the whole company. At SAP, we have started to organize so-called screw-up nights now, where we really have management on stage. It's not recorded. It's a safe environment. People come into a coffee corner. There's like 100 people there, and people appear on stage and talk about their personal failures in their job, things where they really screwed it up. And that's actually just a good way to. It also creates a lot of fun. So, coming from a hierarchical, biased, stuffy, not so modern company in the past, and having all these issues and having these reports from colleagues that they're also having these issues, the thing that you need to keep in mind is it's habit changing for every one of us. It starts with every one of us. It does not start with management. Don't wait for anybody else to get it started. It's on every one of us, and all the tiny steps that we can take towards a more inclusive and more diverse environment will help everyone who is part of your teams. And habits don't change from, they don't change just like in a second. So it needs constant reinforcement. Don't stop talking to people about why this is crucial. As promised, here are some of the books that I mentioned in the beginning. So here's that. My personal favorite is The Loudest Duck by Laura Liswood, where also this Noah's Ark paradox is explained in more detail. Then we have Multipliers, and that is actually about leadership styles and also talking about failure more openly and all these things that you can do when you manage teams to really become a better leader and not just overrule people and micromanage, but help them to get smarter around you. And The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, it's actually a leadership fable. I can highly recommend it because it's really also a good read. Basically what they cover is also what you can do to make it all go wrong and how you can counteract this. And that's basically it.